I think gamer still is stigmatized, and I don't know if there is a way to change it, but that's what I would want people to know is like it's even if you play casual games, you are a gamer, and this industry it does impact you, and it is interesting, and it is part of culture too.
Hey there, and welcome to Courageous, a place for smart conversations that explore how people move bravely and boldly around the world. Courage, of course, comes in many, many forms, and I think you're going to be very inspired by today's guest. Her name is Kalie Moore. She is the founder of HiVive PR, and I certainly learned a lot from our conversation that you're about to listen to. We talk about the space between media and the video games industry. I personally have not seen many people talk about this space, so I, again, certainly learned so much, and I hope you do too. We covered her strategic approach to media coverage, the role of public narratives, of how it's shaping the games industry, and just how she has been and continues to spearhead this space. And without further ado, here is our lovely conversation. Hope you enjoy. Joining me today is founder and CEO of HiVive PR. That's a boutique communications agency with teams in New York, Berlin, and Manila, truly global. And she specializes in PR for gaming, Web3, and AI. And you're an angel investor. I want to welcome in Kalie Moore. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for giving us your precious time. I am so excited to have you on the podcast because I find you so fascinating in what you do, because you're such an ambitious woman who lives comfortably in the space of this digital world. It's an exciting field, but it's also a little scary and the wild, wild west in many, many aspects. So tell me what you do for a living and all the aspects of what you do.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of HiVive PR. We are a boutique comms consultancy, as you shared, that really sits at the intersection, I would say, of gaming and interactive entertainment. We aren't exclusively gaming. I think gaming as a form of entertainment has evolved, and I like to say that we've evolved with it. So we do have clients that are game studios within the UGC space. We work with a lot of like the leading platforms, UGC platforms like Overwolf, and then of course, I think one of the interesting things about gaming is a lot of interesting tech actually started in gaming. So we also do tech PR and a lot of AI PR as well now. But my background and my roots are in gaming.
That's so cool. Yeah, tell me more about, you mentioned Overwolf. Tell me some of the people that you work with.
Yeah, so we're pretty small by design. I had an agency before this. I think we scaled too quickly. I really don't believe in the agency model where myself as a founder would sell you and then hand you off to someone junior. So every single person on my team is extremely senior. Everyone has led PR in their vertical for years. I also think it's really important that you, as a professional, should be pitching your clients, not handing off the pitching to someone else. I think you can spot trends. There's better storytelling. I don't like it any other way. So we only work with about 10 clients. They include venture capital firms like Play Ventures, which is the #1 gaming fund by returns. Overwolf, as I mentioned, which is the leading UGC platform that's also doing a lot of really interesting work in the brand space. We've worked with UGC related studios. So those are studios that are building within Roblox in Fortnite. We work with Wonderworks, which has the really cool SpongeBob IP. We're working with Look North World, for instance. And then we do have a lot of clients also in the AI space. Some that were in gaming before and now pivoted into AI. We work with the We Are Mighty team, which was a game studio, and they developed all this really cool AI infrastructure. And then they decided, you know what, we're really wanting to lean into this. And they've launched Secret Sauce, which helps people create brand assets at scale, for instance. We've done a lot of interesting work this last week. We worked with a a marketing agency that's really spun out an AI product called Uplane. We just got their announcement covered in Business Insider, and Stow Real, which is a super innovative micro drama platform with a UGC component that just raised a big round as well.
That is so interesting. So micro entertainment, like, are you saying like the shorts, like dramas that are like the shorts? I actually it's really fascinating, and it's a whole. I know there's a whole industry around it now, and that's so cool.
It is.
You
It's
get to
really cool. And I
experiment.
think like,
Yeah.
with AI, I think they're going to be enabling people to create and then partake in revenue if you want to create your own micro dramas and a platform for that too, which I think I am nervous about AI, but I'm also super excited about it because I think it enables a new layer of creativity that for those of us who weren't technical, or like I know what I like design wise, but I'm not an artistic person. But now like I've been playing in Claude design all morning and I can be dangerous now.
Ooh, I love that. Dangerous woman. What? Okay, you mentioned tech and how it's so exciting to be in this space where you are because of the tech, the newest tech that you're, like we said, just the micro drama and all that stuff too. You're at the precipice, or like the always at the edge of all the tech. Is that why you got into all this? How did you get into the games world and then obviously the PR world now?
Yeah. So I made up my job, essentially. So I went to college really young. I went to college when I was 16. I finished college when I was 19.
Wow.
And I think I thought a lot of what a lot of people who don't actually know what they want to do is like, I'm just going to go to law school because why not? I'm an overachiever and I like school. But I decided to take a year gap before applying to law school. And I worked in the legal field, which is the best thing I ever did because within a week I was like, I absolutely hate this. So I worked at a law firm, Morrison Forster, called MoFo, and I did biz dev for their intellectual property practice, which can be boring, but I actually thought kind of patent law was interesting, but I hated being in a windowless office for a very long time. It's just like it wasn't me. But I was able to save up some money. Because I finished school so early, I'd never really traveled. So I was able to take some time off. I thought it'd be a couple months. It was almost 2 years, and I backpacked through Asia, South America, and then I came to Europe, and I really came to Berlin just completely randomly. Some guy I was dating had an art show here, and I really fell in love with Berlin. So this was 2013, 2014, and there was a big startup scene booming here, and I'm from San Francisco Bay Area. I went to college in San Francisco. And so when people heard that I was from the Bay Area, even though I had been in tech before, like IP law, but not, Silicon Valley tech, people were like, oh, that's so interesting. And there was the first startup accelerator here was called Startup Bootcamp, and they hired me as an entrepreneur in residence. And kind of one of the things that I did was I took these European startups, and they really wanted international press coverage. And I knew a lot of journalists, just people I'd been friends with before, people I knew in San Francisco. And so I started just pitching some stories for these startups that I was working with, and it really stuck. So I basically just started doing PR as part of that entrepreneur in residence program. And then from there, got jobs in Berlin, like head of comms for a handful of different startups. And then from there, I was introduced to a man who's actually known as the godfather of esports, Jens Hilgers, who had a couple of very successful gaming companies, and he was about to launch a fund called Bitcraft. And so he hired me on, and I did all the internal comms and external comms for Bitcraft and all the portfolio companies. And that's a huge fund now. They have over 1 billion assets under management, and it's quite successful. So yeah, that was my entry into games PR.
What an entry. So it wasn't all by happenstance, but you clearly like exuded the energy of somebody who was so capable and also willing to try new things. Do you feel like that was you back then? And how did you get into
I
that?
think like my superpower, if like I could pick one, is I think I'm very good at identifying trends and then capitalizing on them. I was pretty early to crypto too. and did, I mean, not life changing money, but my kitchen is crypto money, right? And we definitely got on, we were early adopters of not just AI, but building out our own tools in AI, but also geo optimization. So if you look up what's the number one AI PR agency on like ChatGPT, we come up first. So I've always been an early adopter of tech that I'm interested in.
That's awesome. I like to think of myself as one, but probably not as early adopter as you are. So it's so cool to be able to learn from people like you, and have these conversations. That's why I love podcasts and like just conversations in general. But what are some of the challenges that you face on a kind of day-to-day basis within the gaming world and working in PR? Because I find that as I'm learning more about the games world, it's how do like it's not as well known, or like other industries like fashion, media, whatever it is. It's so, there's a lot out there, but the
Yeah.
gaming world is a little bit different. How would you describe it, and like what are some of the challenges you've faced so far?
Yeah, so I think gaming is in a tricky period right now. Um, Gaming is now competing, not just, it used to be, there's other games, right? But now you're competing with everything else that takes people's attention. So sports betting, social media, porn, right? Like, so people aren't necessarily gaming as much, especially I think younger people, because there are other things to take their attention. There's also more games launching than ever before. So I think it's harder than ever for a game studio to stick out. So also the funding landscape has completely changed. Gaming saw huge amounts of investment during the pandemic because everyone is at home playing games. And then a lot of that investment didn't pay off, and so investors aren't putting money in games like they used to. So it's really hard to like start, I think it's always been tricky to launch a studio, but it's really hard to launch a studio. It's really hard to launch games that stand out. It's incredibly competitive. There's not a lot of money in it. Jobs are drying up, so it doesn't feel like an industry that's on the up and up right now. I think this is something that I've always kind of thought about. That's why we've never been exclusively gaming, right? I do think it's important to have your niche and your vertical, and it's always honestly an industry I really like. But at the end of the day, I run a business and I have a family to feed, so I'm never going to put all of my eggs in one basket. I also think we're seeing this across all journalism, but especially games journalism. There's less journalists than ever before. A lot of sites have gone down, have folded. So you're pitching to a smaller pool of people as well, which makes the job a little bit less fun.
Yeah. Man, yeah, it's an interesting time to get into gaming journalism for me, because as you say that, I'm jumping into the pool. And let's actually talk about media and the games world, actually.
Yeah.
So there's so many things I want to talk about. So as you say, games journalism pool is dwindling. What do you think is needed right now in the space right now? There's a lot of layoffs in the gaming industry. As a PR person representing these smaller studios, what's needed right now from your perspective?
No, I think like one of the things that we do continue, the stories that we get to continue to tell, is I think everyone loves the human interest stories, right? So you don't necessarily have to be a gamer. Like I don't need to read a story about like what's the hottest new game coming out, but instead there are human interest stories that span across genres. Like I think in another podcast you're doing, you're talking to um, a UGC creator, so someone who does mods for games. His name is Sandy. He was a stay-at-home dad, taking care of a daughter who had epilepsy, and he created changes in games or mods in games for her. And he's been able to sell those to people who want to play with that type of mod. And now he's making something like 25,000 a month to support his family. And that's a story story that we can pitch to game specific journalists, but that's also just a human interest story of, people thinking about creating careers in interesting ways. So, I think even though the media landscape is shifting, we're actually seeing more coverage than ever before
Oh.
because it's how you pitch people and how you pitch stories. And it's funny because I think I'd actually be interested to hear your take. Like, I my understanding is, and I also co-host a podcast, so I get pitches as well. And 90% of them are AI, and they're written by AI because it's the exact same format of like, I saw your insert last episode and I found it so enlightening of XYZ, and it's clearly written by ChatGPT or Claude. And then they give me this AI pitch, and it's usually nothing related to what the podcast, which is about gaming, is. But even if it was, it's like, I don't need some heartfelt thing, but I want pitches of someone who's actually listened to my podcast, who knows the type of guests that I want and the type of stuff that we cover. And I found now it's actually easier to land stories because we use AI for a lot of things internally, but we don't use AI for any of our pitches. And I think that comes through like every single podcast that I pitch. Like I don't tune in every single week, but I've listened to that podcast before I pitch it. So in some ways, it's the bar is really low. I think lower than it has been before. So if you are a good PR person, you can place stories easier than before, in my opinion.
How do you pitch differently these days compared to maybe like a year ago?
I feel like on LinkedIn, you always hear that, like, you can no longer just send a story to 30 journalists and like cross your fingers. And I'm like, whoever did that? Like, I've never sent a mass pitch where you blind copy people. Everything I've sent has always been curated of like, why would this person want to cover this story? Even if we have something like a funding announcement that we know is going to get picked up everywhere, it's like we still have very curated pitches to each person of, referencing, I know you've covered this round, which is similar, or we previously covered this client before, like connecting the dots for busy journalists. So I don't know. I don't think the only thing that's changed is we kind of have less people to pitch to. I mean, games particularly, like, Axios isn't doing their gaming news anymore. Washington Post gaming closed down a long time. I mean, there's multiple examples, right? So who we pitch is, I don't even know if it's necessarily gotten smaller, but it's definitely has changed too.
I watched an interview that you did with Navik, with Stephen Totillo.
Yeah.
He has the game file, but you talked about with him how niche media is where you pitch a lot more to these days, and there's a lot more ROI when it comes to like pitching those instead of like legacy media. Why is that? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I also think it totally depends on what your client goals are too, right? Like if we were going to pitch for, like, let's say we have a VC client and they want to get in front of potential LPs. Of course, we want Forbes and the Fortunes because that comes with credibility. But if you really want to get in front of LPs, like I think there's a Substack Newcomer, right? Which is, it's very VC focused, VCs, LPs, read that. It's probably much smaller than Fortune or Forbes, but your audience is so targeted. Like, or there's one of my clients has a great growth story, and I actually do think I could get it in a Forbes or a Business Insider. It's a business growth story, but depending on what their goals are, like if they want to reach more publishers and studio heads, I would pitch to Steven at GameFile instead. So I think media is getting a lot more niche and specific, but depending on business goals, that could actually be a much better thing. Like I think we've kind of revamped all of our reporting, and one of the things that we report on is total estimated views of an article, which I personally hate because I don't think that shows any kind of ROI. But it feels weird to take it out, especially with like our legacy clients. It's like we've been reporting on this for, the last 8 years. So if we now take those numbers out, it looks kind of weird. But like to me, it's just such an absolute vanity metric that doesn't matter at all. It's like how like PR people apparently back in the day, this is before my time, they used to calculate ROI of like, okay, if we get you an article in the Wall Street Journal, we know that the Wall Street Journal would charge 50,000 for an ad of that size, so therefore it's a $50,000 value. And it's like the mental gymnastics like don't quite add up, but I can see, you can see how people are connecting the dots there. But total audience size feels like that. It feels really
Yeah.
outdated to me.
Yeah, I've always felt that way too. As a journalist, I'm like, the value is with the staying power of the story.
Yeah. And also where that story is being picked up now too. It's like one of the things that we've built out internally is, are the articles we place you in, are they surfacing in the LLMs when people do queries about either your company or your industry, right? Like to me, that's more interesting in these stories being referenced than how many people do we think looked at this story.
Right. And I'm sure with AI and more tools these days, it's easier to maybe put measurable numbers on that. Because I think previously, from what I understand, it was just hard to put a number and metrics around like how much impact you're having with the story.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to do a shameless plug for my new company because that even with the tools, it's not easy. So we built this out internally and we're launching it externally in like the coming weeks. It's taken longer to launch than I would have liked, mostly doing the boring design stuff, not the technology itself. But for every single article you get your client, we have the technology that does the queries related to that topic to see, okay, is this being referenced? Is it being referenced in Gemini, ChatGPT, or Claude? And then we kind of give it a visibility metric, but there isn't any other tool out there that does that yet. There's a lot of selling points of I think of the tool and the technology. But we're getting clients more and more interested in how is earned media actually shaping how we're known.
As somebody who creates media conversations around your clients and around in the games world, what's the current media conversation around the games industry like, and how are you trying to change that narrative?
That's a really good question. And I think it depends if you're talking to more games media or mainstream media. I don't know, like the games industry feels like a little bit doom and gloom. Like when you go to the events like GDC, there's definitely less attendance. There's a lot more talk about layoff. There's a lot of fear with AI. And when you're in the industry, like that you see it, the industry specific media is covering that. But I don't get the sense that the kind of more of the business journals. I mean, of course, like the business journals like Cecilia from Bloomberg 100% gets it. Gaming is her beat. But just, you're kind of a tech reporter at Business Insider, for instance. I don't know if it's as kind of widely known. Like, yes, okay, numbers are down, but the publicly traded games companies are still doing quite well and making good money. And there's a lot of hype, like, with GTA 6 coming out, whenever it's going to come out, there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of positive stories. So I think it really depends on who you are speaking to. It almost feels, I don't want to say hidden secret, but I don't think it's like common knowledge. If you ask a random person on the street of like, is games industry up or down? I think people would be like, I don't know, like it's probably up. Like I play all these games on my phone. It feels industry specific.
What's an uncomfortable truth about the games industry? And I guess how are you and the games companies trying to shape public narratives around gaming?
Oh, there's so many different angles we could take this. I think
Yeah.
an uncomfortable truth is AI is coming. It is here. Everyone is using it, but gamers still say they hate it and like complain on Reddit. And of course, in the beginning, when people were posting, I can't remember what studio was. I'm not going to call them out, even I did remember they had some ad and someone had 6 fingers, and it just felt like really sloppy work in the early days. And every gamer was like, "Oh, I hate this. AI is terrible." But at the same time, gamers want endless experiences, right? Like you don't want to get to that last level, or you want a bunch of different characters, and that is going to be done through AI. And I see a lot of game studios, not necessarily the ones that we work with, but just across the board. And when you ask them questions, even with my Navic podcast, when you ask them questions about AI, everyone's like, "Oh, well, we use it to clean up the artwork, or we don't take away any jobs or creativity." And I think we should shift the narrative, because it's not real. It almost feels like you're hiding something from the gaming community, and instead focusing on AI can actually be used in positive ways to give you the kind of content that you want, but also to enable you, the gamer, to participate in content in a way that you couldn't have done before. And yeah, I think we need to lean into it rather than shy away from it too. I also think the AI industry, not just gaming, overall is doing a terrible job communicating. It's doom and gloom, and they're like, "Oh, my model is so amazing, but we can't let it go because it's going to change everything." And the more that we have the positive side of AI narrative, like the better it's going to be, because like I said, it's not going anywhere. So we can choose to embrace it or fear it, but maybe we should start thinking about the positive parts a bit more too.
I find that it's starting to change now. I
Yeah.
think people are, now that they're kind of okay, fear and doom and gloom, let's get over that. I think it's definitely changing. Do you feel like there's enough transparency in the games world right now?
Transparency is needed, um but more honesty. Like I don't care
Yeah.
what tools people are using, but people don't want the fans to turn on them. And
Yeah.
so maybe if there was like a beloved game or experience, and you could say like, "Okay, we didn't create this from AI from the beginning, but like we created this character and we're able to like scale it, or like create all these different." Yeah, I do think that would be positive, but people just don't want to put their heads on the line, because gamers still overwhelmingly say they hate um,
Yeah.
AI. But it's
Yeah.
also like, we get into this with like the mobile free to play. People hated that too, or said they hated that. But if you look at the numbers, it's like, it's very widely adopted.
Do you feel like the consumers and the gamers themselves are leading the narrative around gaming, or is it
Yeah.
the companies? Okay.
No, no, I feel like the
Definitely.
consumers are speaking up. They're maybe it's a vocal minority too, but it's on Reddit, and the developers are scared to speak out.
Gotcha. Um, what are some of the winning founders that you worked with? What are they doing differently?
That's a really good question. The winning founders that I work with put their heads down and don't care about the noise. They aren't looking at what the competition is doing. I get enticed by shiny things, like the different AI toolings. Like they don't care. They know their mission. They are mission driven. They can focus on that and like compartmentalize in a way that I'm really not good at. I like to look and examine the trends, probably why I'm in comms, but I don't think they're as concerned as I am. They know that it ebbs and it flows, and there probably will be a market correction, just like there was with gaming, just like there was with crypto, and they'll still be there building successful companies,
That's so cool.
despite what the tools are.
Yeah, they hire you to deal with the all that stuff, and they can just, yeah, put their head down. Um, what are the winning media people, journalists, doing differently in the games world?
It's a great question. And I think that is still being kind of like rewritten. I think how we view media, how we consume media is really changing. And what I'm seeing in the games industry and across the board, but I'm seeing people really take ownership and change things. So Stephen Totia is a great example, right? Axios said, we don't have a budget for this. He could have gone somewhere else. And he's like, no, I know what I want to write about. I believe that I have the following, like I can do this. And he's creating great content. I think who I'm really continue to be inspired and impressed by is Dean Takahashi and the whole GamesBeat team. Like they spun GamesBeat out of VentureBeat in a really kind of tricky moment. He's been there for over 20 years. And like how they've been able to grow, like also from the event standpoint, their events are excellent. All of our clients want to be there. Now they have their own podcast. He's going to different events. Just how he's been able to take control and really build a media company that he wants to build. I think it's resonating with a lot of people, and I think they have a lot of support. We're also seeing, it's been interesting, this isn't necessarily game specific, but I feel like a lot more of journalists are kind of turning into creators. Like you see it on LinkedIn too, for better or worse, right? I have mixed feelings about that, as I'm sure they do too. I don't think when you went to journalism school, you thought like, I know what I want to be doing, is like filming myself talking about a story. But I think that's what journalists need to do to compete with content creators who aren't also journalists, but are now kind of responsible for breaking news. I think it's I actually think it's a huge opportunity. I would be worried if like my daughter, for instance, said that she wanted to be a journalist. She's only 6, so she has time to figure it out. Like, I feel like you could totally rewrite the journalism playbook right now in probably a very, very interesting and unique way. But it's going to look completely different than it did 10 years ago. How are you feeling about it? I mean, you're doing a lot of, I don't know if you always did a lot of like on camera stuff, but I feel like that's what people want to see. They want to see the video podcast. You're doing that like with Gamer Galaxy too. Were you always really on camera, or are you seeing that a lot more now?
The last 10 years has been very much like I started on camera, but then I went back to just being a producer behind the scenes, and I keep going back and forth. And there's good, like, positives to both sides. And I am starting to do more on camera stuff these days because I think of the change. And you're right, people do want to see more. One of the things that I think people want to see right now, especially with journalism, because there's so much media slop out there, what it really takes behind the scenes to be a true journalist rather than a content creator. And I think people want the realness of what it takes. And I want to be able to show people that there's a huge, like, there's an art and a craft to journalism rather than just producing content.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like, okay, so I know New York Times is everyone's gold standard, right? Like, they're making more money than ever, also killing it with games. I am on their games every single morning. It's like my only addiction right now. Bloomberg has games, LinkedIn's trying to do games, New Yorker, I tried to get into Sheffalo, it's just not quite there. But the New York Times, I think, has done a really nice job of that format of, like, you still have the podcast, but they are video. I really love their reporter reads too, where they just have a reporter set up the story too, kind of like why they wrote it, like what was interesting to them, is I think a very nice light version of that. You know, they aren't asking every reporter to go and have their own TikTok, or maybe they are, and I mean, I'm trying not to be on TikTok, and I don't see that, but I feel like it's a really good medium in a way that resonates with me personally.
Yeah, switching gears a little bit, I kind of wanted to understand your view of the culture. So I still find when I talk about, okay, hey, I want to cover gaming in the video games industry, I still find that I come across people who are like, ooh, especially women who hear, oh, gaming, AI, and they go, ooh, no, that's not my world. Yeah. Let me stay away from that as far as I can. What would you say to those people, and why they should care about the video games industry?
Well, I would say, Can you show me what like app you use the most? Like, what are your top three apps? I was doing research because I had this idea for a game a long time ago, and it was geared towards women. And so I asked every single woman I come across, like, show me what apps you use the most. Every single one of them was a game, and it was like games that I'd be like what? Like there was this one woman who's like this chief of staff, so buttoned up. I love her, and she had like this game where you are like running a pizza parlor and it's very stressful. She was on that all the time. And if I would have asked her, are you a gamer? She'd be like, no, are you kidding me? And then she's in this like pizza world. Or there's another woman, she's the CEO of this company. And like if I would have asked her if she was a gamer, she would 100% said no. And it was like this, it's called Hue, where you kind of match up the colors. It's like a very calming thing. Every single woman I know is actually a gamer and they don't consider themselves to be gamers. Even I run a couple companies. I have young kids. I have a switch from the pandemic like we all did. But like, I am actually a gamer because after I look at my emails on Slack, the first thing I do is Wordle and Spelling Bee from the New York Times. I'm actually kind of like a power user. I think if I didn't have this job, I wouldn't consider myself a gamer, but I feel like it's like a $50 a year subscription and like no problem. Like, of course I'm going to pay for that. So I think gamer still is stigmatized. And I don't know if there is a way to change it, but that's what I would want people to know is like, even if you play casual games, you are a gamer, and this industry, it does impact you, and it is interesting, and it is part of culture too.
Yeah, isn't it strange that like I find gaming culture is the culture that leads just societal culture these days, and yet there's still a dark stigma around the culture, especially when it comes to women. I wonder why that is, and what do you think is needed to change that?
Well, I think the fandoms are so different. Like gaming is all encompassing. It'd be like, do you like sports? And if someone asked me if I like sports, probably not. But I am at a Pilates reformer class 5 days a week. Like, I'm probably the fittest I've been in my life, but I still wouldn't consider myself a sports person, which is kind of the same thing. So I think it's just, there's very different fandoms and they all look extremely different, but the one thing they have in common is how engaged people are. I told you I recorded some podcasts through Navic, and I interviewed the CEO of Fusebox Games. They have the Love Island game, and if you look at the Love Island game subreddit, it's like, do people just play all like they are so engaged and upset and love, it's so intense. But it's like you have that, and then you also have the people who are esports, as we kind of talked before we got on this call, of people who are doing competition, and like those are both gamers, but they couldn't be further apart. So I don't know if we're ever going to agree on this group of gaming. I think we just need to make sure that these different groups have voices, so people do know, like, oh, okay, if I spend $1,000 in my Love Island game, I am part of this broader ecosystem and community, even though it looks very different.
Yeah, that's such a good point. What's a trend you think you're seeing right now that it seems super ridiculous, but maybe in 5 years from now, you think it'll be super obvious to people?
Oh man, that is such a good question. It's gonna be super obvious to people. I don't have a good answer for that, but this is like one of those things I'm going to think about at 3 a.m. and it's going to come to me, and I'm
Yeah.
going to email to you about it. That's a wonderful question, and I'm sorry. I don't have anything
No,
about it.
I was also thinking about this, and if I had to answer this, even for the journalism world, I wouldn't know what to think.
Yeah,
It's a yeah, exactly. 3 a.m. in the morning for
yeah,
sure.
because I'm not sure any is if okay, to me it feels like we're in the start of a new era. Like I really do think, how machinery changed with the industrial revolution, and there's so many. Do you listen to the search engine podcast? Do
No,
you
but
know
now I
by
guess
any
I
chance?
have to.
Oh, it's a phenomenal podcast. It's about
Okay.
technology, but they did this episode, and they started the episode by talking about jobs that no longer exist because of the Industrial Revolution, and like the people who would go and light the street lights. And then there was this
Mm.
person that would like knock on buildings to wake people up at 6 in the morning before we had electricity, and it was like that was a job, and we don't even think about it. And I feel like that's going to be like whatever is happening now in this era of AI, that there's going to be so many jobs that don't exist, but there's going to be so many jobs that we can't even fathom right now. So I can't
Yeah.
even think of a trend right now that could have staying power 5 years from now, because I just feel like we're on the cusp of this like really exciting, maybe scary, but really exciting change. And I don't know what's going to stick 5 years from now. I don't think anyone does.
Yeah. Do you feel like, you know how they say, oh, because of AI now, things are going to change so much faster and every like few seconds, it's like social media where like the algorithms and the strategies change every like couple months. Do you feel like that will be the case in in the next few years, or do you still feel like there's going to be a semblance of structure and kind of a little more pacedness?
I think it's an arms race right now when you look at like the big LLMs. Like, I think this great example is last year. I mean, I knew Claude existed, but I was on ChatGPT, and then Claude made all of their updates, and then when they came out, Claude Code and Claude
Right.
Cowork, like I immediately canceled ChatGPT, as like a lot of people did, and it feels like. I think it's also like they launched Claude Design like 3 days ago. The stuff that you can do as a non-designer and Claude Design is like life
Mind blowing.
changing.
Yeah.
And so I think while there still is an arms race, it's going to change a lot. But I do think one of these companies, I hope Claude, will come out like Google, where it's like, okay, there is kind of a clear winner at some point, and then then I don't want to say the pace slows down, but like you can be a little bit more strategic, right? Like, once Instagram became big, if you wanted to be an influencer, it's like, okay, you had this content plan and consistent cadence, and you didn't have to be on like every single different platform. And then TikTok came around, but right now this arms race is making like kind of anyone could be the winner. So you want to try to be on, not necessarily be on, but you wanted to understand the different platforms, the different LLMs, and how that can impact your business. But I hope I hope it slows down a little bit. I can't imagine working at the pace that I've
Yeah.
worked the last like 8 months, like forever would be too much.
Okay, let's finally get into esports. You've had an interesting run, or you've had a history with esports. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I told you how I met Jens Hilgers, and I went in-house at Bitcraft, and that was my entry into gaming. And Jens had a bunch of esports company, ESL probably being the most famous, and he also invested in teams. And esports was really huge at the time, like really a peak, right? This is probably about 8, 9 years ago. And so, with Yen's encouragement, I started my first agency with two co-founders, which was called The Story Mob. And at the time, we were the world's first esports specific agency. So we worked with most of the top teams in esports and a lot of the top publishers. And then I did that for a couple of years, and um, ended up selling my stake in the company to my co-founders and starting HiVive. And I'm not going to say anything negative about esports. Like, we still work in esports adjacent industries, but I certainly don't represent any esports teams.
Gotcha. It's interesting. You had talked a little bit about egos. That there are big egos prior to our conversation here on the podcast, but I find that in the US, maybe it is because of the big egos, but I find that in the US, there's not a lot of people that talk about esports as much. I grew up part of my childhood in South Korea, and esports is huge over there, and with a lot of other countries. But the US it's not quite, maybe in the beginning, we talked to Fatality, Jonathan Wendell, a while back. But esports is not as big, and even when I want to talk about it, people are not as forthcoming about talking about esports, even in the gaming industry. I'm curious as to why that is.
Well, esports had its heyday. So esports was supposed to be, it was supposed to take on sports, right? And there
Right.
were a couple of years there that there was just so much money going into it, especially the leagues, with League of Legends leagues. Also, Overwatch had a league, and people were paying millions of dollars to participate. So then you had a lot of the pro sports teams coming in and like buying teams, sponsoring teams. There were lots of esports events at Madison Square Garden with like lots of different celebrities. People really thought this was going to be the next big thing. It's funny, I recently had dinner with some people from my esports days. No one's in esports anymore, but they're doing something in gaming. And we just talked about like what a crazy time that was, that there would be these, founders of esports teams, which would be, they were all very different, but like a super, like a, 21-year-old, like really nerdy kid who's at a company that's valued at, I don't know how many millions of dollars, kind of based on speculation. And then it didn't pan out, right? Like there wasn't enough money in it. There are still brand deals in esports, but it was nothing that was predictive. It's nothing that rivals like, professional sports. And so, investors weren't seeing ROI, and people stopped funding it. And I think it got smaller. Like, esports is still obviously a thing, but it lacks the economic promise that it once had.
Yeah. What is it like to be a woman in the games world?
Yeah. So also with esports, there were teams. I want to say Dignitas, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong. Like they had an esports team, and there were certainly like women leaders at esports teams. Even still to this day, the CMO of G2 Esports is incredible. And this is gut feeling. This is not based off of any data. I don't think it was an accessibility issue of why women weren't really involved in esports. I think a lot of women do play the games, but I don't think, once again, gut feeling, like women want to watch people play video games as much. There are definitely women who want to watch their favorite, esports players play League of Legends, but I don't think it was, this huge percentage of the population. Even though women do play League of Legends, it's just like who wants to watch people play League of Legends. So I think it was more of an interest thing rather than women aren't being catered to, or this isn't for women. I can't speak for anyone else's experience, but I was often one of the only women in the room at esports events, and I never felt unwelcome or that I shouldn't be there in any way.
Yeah, that's great, because that's also how I felt. And like I was able to go to Gamescom last year, and it was so beautiful. Like when I'm always talking about games with people, I've also felt very welcome, but I felt like there was also this narrative that women weren't welcome, which I mean, there are instances where women weren't welcome, but ultimately it's always been like a really safe community and welcoming.
I've also always had a seat at the table too, like even when I was young, and I feel like there were a lot of men who were mentors, Jens Hilgers being one of them, who I don't think looked at me any different if I would have been like a man or a woman, and like made sure that I was included regardless of gender. Like I really didn't feel that it came up in any meaningful way.
Great. Amazing.
Yeah. Which I know isn't everyone's experience, and I also could have just been lucky, right? But yeah, it was never an issue.
That's awesome.
Like the one thing I'm really excited about in the games industry is, like I told you, I was at GDC and I did feel a little bit doom and gloom, but the one thing that I am super bullish on is UGC in gaming, which I know that we touched on, and I know that a lot of my clients are in this space, but I do think we're entering a new era of creativity, and there's so many people. The best mod authors aren't just the best developers. It's because they know the game inside and out, and they can say, what would be really cool in this game, like this very specific thing. And if you don't like live and breathe and die in that game, you're never going to think to create that. So it doesn't matter if someone has a good, game studio. If you don't breathe this culture, you aren't going to be a good mod author. But maybe there's people who, weren't interested in coding or didn't know how to do it. But now with like the advent of AI, you're really going to be able to build anything you want to build. And I think this is going to open up this door of creation like we've never seen before. And you see this like with the kids who are growing up playing Roblox and UEF, and like they're just going to have so much opportunity in this space. So I'm really excited about that. And I think also this is going to be a great thing with like fandom and like also with women too. It's like there are these women who are playing these really specific games. They love these games, and maybe depending on what type of game, like Sims allows like modding and stuff now too. And I think that's a great example of you're going to be able to build characters, experiences, accessories in game, and maybe that will make people feel more part of a community.
I love that. Thank you so much for your beautiful insights.
I look forward to meeting you in real life, either at Gamescom or another gaming event.
Love it. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Cheryl. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.